Here we are, everybody, to the episode where Worf says, "Don't tase me, bro," as he gets repeatedly tased over and over again. That reference would have worked better 15 years ago, I think, Clay, but how are you?
I'm good. That's a little behind the times.
Remember when that kid got tased and we all laughed at him?
Yeah, that was before, authoritarian governments were the rage.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like a funny offshoot instead of the hellscape we currently all live in.
It was more of a RoboCop version of a hellscape than anything else, I guess. But yeah, things have changed.
Remember when that guy threw a shoe at George Bush?
Yep. It's the ultimate insult in Islam, I guess, is to throw your shoe at somebody.
Hey, well, gotta throw something, I guess.
We survived. We got through that, and we said, how can life get any worse than this when people are throwing shoes at each other? Honestly, who throws a shoe? You fight like a woman. We're going to play the intro credits right now.
Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
All right, everybody. So, welcome back. This is Till Death Do Us Part. It is the 18th episode of the 7th season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. First aired on the 14th of April, 1999. Written by David Weddle and Bradley Thompson. Directed by Heinrich Colby. In this episode, Sisko agonizes over his vision from the prophets, telling him not to marry Cassidy. Kai Winn receives a vision foretelling a guide who will help her restore Bajor. And Ezri and Worf are interrogated by the Breen. We're joined by Clay to talk about this one. Clay, the original title for this episode was "The Wheels They Are Spinning," but what did you think about it?
I think I probably used the the prophets said that we just, I need to walk this road alone line. I think I used that at least once in college to break up with somebody.
Yeah.
So it's I wish Sisko had just like flicked on his sunglasses and just like walked out to Whitesnake after that. There's a lot of really interesting like stuff going on. I think my favorite bit is at the beginning when Kai Winn shows up and she's just slinging some heavy passive aggressive shit at Sisko, where he's like, "Oh no, that's okay. You don't really need to do anything." She's like, "Oh, you don't have to thank me. I'm happy to do it." And then he mentions that the prophets talk to him, and she's like, "Prophets never talk to me."
Yeah, that's that awkward thing in a conversation where a person says something like that and you don't know how to respond to her. He's like, "Well, as you know, I've never been spoken to by the prophets." And Sisko just says, yeah, that's exactly what I know about you.
Yep. Would you like another drink?
This episode's funny. Like we talked a little bit about the serialization, the way that the show does serialization in the previous episode, where I kind of complained about scenes that were unnecessary, and I think this one might be a little bit better of an example at what I'm talking about in terms of like the pace of what the show chooses to do with things. Because if you think about it, this is kind of a two-parter if you pair it with Penumbra, the episode that came before this. And if you only consider them to be a two-parter, it's a very bad two-parter, where it feels like it just takes an awful long time for the characters to get where they're going, and you're kind of redundantly repeating the storylines over the course of two episodes. And I think that like out of the stories that come out of this one, Dukat and Winn is the new one. Sisko and Cassidy is a continuation of the last episode, and then Worf and Ezri is a continuation of the last episode. And I think that particularly in the Worf and Ezri storyline, which is maybe the weakest, you don't end up anywhere new with them through the course of this entire episode. Like they learn a little bit more about each other, kind of melodramatically, and you learn that the Breen are allying with the Dominion at the very end. But it just strikes me as a very strange story choice, where when you're wrapping up this series, that Worf and Ezri would be one of the stories that you pick. And that ties into the thing that it ties in from the Penumbra episode, is when you do two of these episodes in a row, it really makes me wonder why they chose some of these stories in the first place. Does that make sense?
You don't look well.
I'm fine.
What happened to that brave officer I served with? The one who stood at my side while we fought the entire Klingon Empire with a single ship.
Those were simpler times.
Those days might be gone. But the man I served with isn't. He's still within you. Reach in and grab hold of him, Damar. Cardassia needs a leader.
You were its leader once. You could be again.
The power wraiths have shown me that I have a different destiny. Good luck, old friend.
Yeah, this one in particular, you know, if you call the last episode a setup episode, I don't really know what else you would call this, because though they move through the Sisko and Cassidy stuff, and there is a movement there, excuse me, they're setting up more stuff with Kai Winn and Dukat, and they basically are just wasting time for 40 minutes with Ezri and Worf to give you like one plot movement forward.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a really slow... the stuff with Cassidy and Sisko is fine, but everything else, in the episode that it's in here, it feels incredibly slow. Like everything that happens with Sisko and Cassidy, I feel like you could have done that in one episode.
Yeah.
You know, if that had been the story they were telling, that would be a single episode.
The Prophet in the Penumbra, in other words, they would announce their marriage in like the cold open or something. The prophets would, in the first act, tell him that he can't do that, and he spends the rest of the episode debating what he's going to do until at the very end, instead of originally at the very end of the Penumbra, the prophets reveal that he can't do this, and that's kind of like the cliffhanger ending. But the ending of a condensed episode would be Sisko discovers that he is going to marry Cassidy despite what the prophets had told him earlier in the episode.
Yeah, exactly. And with so little time left, I'm really surprised that A, they're moving so slowly, and B, the stories they are choosing to tell. The Ezri and Worf being the prime example of this, because I don't know why they spend more than a single scene with them before they do the bit at the end where Wei-Yun reveals himself to be partnering with the Breen or whatever. Because if you go back and you look at what's going on there, it's all, the only stuff you're getting from those scenes is like middling personal stuff that doesn't seem to impact anything. I mean, unless Ezri having a thing for Bashir happens to be the linchpin of the winning the Dominion War. I don't know if that's going to really be a big deal.
It's also very artificially brought up where they're just yelling out sentences in their sleep saying like, no, Dr. Bashir, I can't make love to you. I'm in love with Worf.
Yeah. Yeah. Like why are you choosing to, you know, especially since in the last episode, I think we kind of talked about how it's weird to reopen this conversation after they, it seemed like they closed it after the first two episodes with Ezri.
Right.
It's even weirder here because it's not like, why do you, I feel like you have to be able to spend this time you're spending on these like failed escape attempts and getting zapped and screaming out people's name in your sleep. I feel like you have to be able to use that time doing something more constructive for the story you're telling in your last 10 episodes or so.
Yeah. I find it, the Worf thing I find strange because to me it highlights the issue that they really seem like they were delaying the season 7 to get to this final arc point. Like they put a hold on storylines, and because I never got the sense that after Worf and Ezri in the season opener had their thing where Worf is like, it's good to have you around, Ezri, and he seems to have gotten over it. I never got the sense that Worf was really doubting his decision. You know, so when they bring it back up at this point, it feels like they were just holding the ball until they got down, the shot clock got down to 10 seconds, and they're like, now we're going to unload this story on everybody. And it's,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, as important as, and as much as I like the Jadzia and Worf storyline and how Ezri would sort of fit into that, I don't know if it's appropriate to be a third of your final ending arc. It doesn't feel that important or that interesting to me. And they seem like they're doing it just as a way to bring the Breen into it But I would rather, like, I'd rather see what the other characters are doing at this point. We're only checking in with the same group of characters that we saw in Penumbra.
Yeah, and like I think you get one scene with Odo, and he's like just kind of sitting around going like, well, how do you feel about this, Kira?
Yeah, wait for the wedding to start.
Yeah, and Kira's like, I don't know. I don't love it. That's about it.
She's upset because Sisko's defying the will of the prophets, which makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's the stuff that they do get out. It's this weird stuff where Ezri is kind of has a thing for Bashir, so now Worf is jealous about it.
Yep.
And also he's like gotten immediately clingy because he's like, well, we have plenty of time to spend together for the rest of our lives. And
now I get to know you.
Oh,
yeah.
Oops. And it's like, you know what?
This continues to all be Ezri's fault, I think, too. Like,
sure.
Not to,
yeah, I mean, it's, if you're I'm not even going to make an analogy. Yes, it's her fault.
Well, I mean, she particularly because she seems to have come around full circle here in a way that is interesting to me. Like when in Penumbra, it seemed like she was more into the relationship, and it's like I didn't get the sense that she would be the one that would sort of turn around on it. I think that it makes sense, and Worf would be the one who's clingy and attached to her. But at the same point, I don't know why, other than her trill, confused emotionality, why it matters all that much. But I don't know. I just think it's... Go ahead.
I don't know. Like, I just don't understand why them sleeping together couldn't have just been the end of the story.
Right.
It's just, it's like make up, one last fling before you break up kind of thing,
Yeah. Well, I guess,
they just spend so much time doing nothing, and ultimately just for that reveal at the end. Like, am I going to look back on this episode in 3 episodes and go, man, they really set this up when they were writhing around on the floor talking about how they can't escape from the Breen.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think so. You can tell if I'm wrong, please let me know, but I have a feeling that's not going to happen.
I think it's melodramatic in some ways, and I think that it's not it doesn't feel the Worf and Ezri has a storyline that is more interesting to me in some ways than the Sisko storyline. However, I can you can sort of intellectually see why the Sisko storyline is important, even though there's not a tremendous amount of action in it. It's all very much internal. Sisko is deciding what to do. I do feel like the Sisko decision and what he chooses to do makes a lot more sense and is more symbolic of the end coming about than Worf and Ezri. I think that's my major problem with those two. But I think Sisko works, but I'd agree that there's no reason to stretch what he did over 2 episodes and instead make it just the 1 episode. And I think that would be perfect. I mean, to sum up Sisko, he's defied the prophets at this point. He's going to do what he wants to do. Interestingly, and all the time that Starfleet and the emissary role conflicted, he never had a problem with it. But when it's his personal decision, he has a problem with it, which I think is a nice touch. The prophet, I really like the scene with him and the prophet mother, where she seems to finally break from the prophet way of talking and speaks to him like he is her son. She feels sad about the way the things are going.
I did find that whole sequence really, really funny because it was like the Star Trek equivalent of your mother pulling you aside and being like, you cannot marry that woman. She is awful.
I have foreseen it. I think the Sisko storyline is like an important, understandable storyline as to why they would get to this point, and I like the way that he went with it. It just feels stretched out a little bit, and I think that Worf and Ezri are the same except worse for that. So we can wrap up with the other thing about the Worf and Ezri that I think is bizarre, which is, what do you think about the Breen? Which is a very open-ended question, but what do you think about the Breen?
I think they are the worst looking Star Trek character I've ever seen. They look like Doctor Who or like original Battlestar Galactica. I do not like the way they look.
Someone says they look like Bounty Hunter Leia.
Yeah, they look like Bounty Hunter Leia, but like if that costume were made for an amusement park, and so like it's oversized.
Yeah.
It's not like movie ready.
Yeah. I have a few problems with the Breen setup, which is, go ahead.
Sorry, could you just give me a refresher about what the deal with the Breen is? I know we've seen them before, but I can't remember what their deal is.
Sure. So most of it is mentioned in this episode, what their deal is. We've seen them in Indiscretion, I think, was the episode where Gul Dukat and Kira find Zayal on that mining planet. I think the Breen are the ones that had captured her. In this episode, they do a lot of exposition to explain who the Breen are, and even though you've never heard of them, they're a huge power in the Alpha Quadrant, I guess. That's kind of my issue with them. It feels like they ran out of species to make this twist feel like it was going to be impactful, so they had to use the Breen as the stand-in.
That's the main reason I asked, is because, but at the end, Wei Yun is like, quite a reveal, wouldn't you say, that now the Dominion has partnered with the Breen? And I'm like, is that like someone saying like, Delaware has joined the USSR? You know, like, is it like, what does this mean?
This 13th round draft pick is really going to win the championship for us at this point. Yeah.
Hey man, Tom Brady, 6th round pick, greatest of all time.
Yeah, I mean that's the major problem with it, which I'd be fine with. It's just the fact that you've never heard of them, and apparently they are enough to sort of swing the way that the war is going, is the way that Wei Yun is treating it.
Have we seen them, like visually seen them before?
We've seen them, yes, we have.
Okay, I could not. It's only must have been like once, because I did not remember. I knew the name, but I could not remember anything else about them.
They're also in the you might remember. There's one Breen in the 2-parter episode where Garrick, Worf, and Bashir are locked in the Dominion prison camp. Do you remember that 2-parter?
Yes, where
there's
Worf
a Breen who makes
people for 4 days.
Yes, there's a Breen who kills the first Jem'Hadar guard, and Worf says there's an old saying that you never turn your back on a Breen. So that's like the other time that we've seen them.
Gotcha.
But they're not important. There's no reason to remember them, really. That's the...
Until they show up in Discovery Season 3.
That's right. Until it all works forward. I have the same problem with the Breen. I think that they just ran out of races and stuff like that. But I didn't know if you had any other thoughts about them.
Is there someone that you would sub in there that hasn't been used yet?
It should have been like the Romulans or something. It wouldn't make sense in the way that they've told the story to be the Romulans, but it would have to be someone like the Romulans to do it, I think.
Yeah. I was expecting something a little bit more sneaky, in that, you know, they talk about, Ezri talks about how she doesn't even know what they look like. I wonder if they're hairy because it's cold on Breen or whatever. My first instinct was that it was going to turn out that they were Klingons. Or something like that. Like you were going to reveal at the end they were going to take their helmets off, and it was going to be
Martok.
Not Martok. The other one, with the crazy eyes, Gowron. Yeah, like him or something. Is he dead? Is he dead in the show? I can't remember.
No, he's alive. He's alive and ticking.
Yeah, I was expecting something like that. Like they were going to reveal themselves to be a major player that we hadn't seen in a while, that would really change the landscape instead of just, guys with buckets on their heads.
You were expecting there to be some kind of story narrative resonance to their appearance, but it's absolutely not the case. They're just going to be bizarre, brutal aliens that Worf tells us how devastating they are, because apparently 150 years ago, whatever, the Klingon Empire sent a whole fleet to attack Breen and conquer it, and they were never heard from again. So they're not.
See, that was why I thought they were going to be Klingons, because he talks about that. Ezri says, nobody knows what they look like. I was like, well, then it must be like whatever this fleet has become.
Oh, I see.
Part of the Breen cult, something like that. Like I was expecting a bit of a twist instead of just, it
would be
Daft Punk leading Ezri and Worf to Wei Yun.
It would be like the in Insurrection, the Sona are the same race as the aliens that live on the planet.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, why not?
I guess before we move to anything else, let's get the big change of this episode is Dukat and the Winn storyline. What'd you think of that one?
So is the vision that Kai Winn sees, is that from the Pa-wraiths, or is that legit from the prophets?
Pa-wraiths.
Okay. Do they say that in the show? I must have missed it.
They don't. It's just the fact they have not said that yet, but it is the power wraiths, and I think you're just supposed to assume that the prophets are never going to speak to her, but the power wraiths will.
So what are if Sisko says if the word has gotten around that Sisko and Cassidy are not getting married, what is the point of that vision? Because the vision that they give Kai Winn is you have to get him back on track or something, right?
Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, I don't know. I guess it remains to have a point after he actually does get married, but she gets that vision and then does not act on it whatsoever. And then this guy shows up and they, make out, which I was not a fan of.
Well, the vision tells her that she needs to follow the lead of a farmer.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I missed that part.
So when Dukat shows up and he says, "I'm a farmer from this place," she goes, "Oh, this must be the guy." So the vision was given to her more just for her to follow Dukat when he shows up.
Okay. Because, I read it initially as though they're like, yeah, you got to stop Sisko from doing the wrong thing, and then she just doesn't do anything.
Right. she hangs out with Dukat for a while and just has some tea. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he pulls the thing where he was like, "Don't you remember? We were in the same class together at Duke." And she's like, "What?" He's like, "Yes, I sat behind you. I always loved your hair." And she's like, "Oh."
He's like, "I got a little drunk. Yeah. A little drunk at that party. It was a little inappropriate."
You look good. It's like that thing. It's the thing that Bill Murray does in Groundhog Day where he sees the girl he wants to sleep with, so he goes in and asks her like 5 questions.
Right.
And then so the next day he comes in and knows all that stuff about her. It's like that.
Yep. I know the ultimate fantasy right there, just to know her. It's the same with the Black Mirror episode we did where he redoes the name so he knows who's going to greet him at the door and he doesn't have to ask like, "Who are you?" or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
I like the Duke. I don't know. This is hard to say. I think that I really like the concept of what they've done with these two. I don't know if the scenes have enough electricity to really power what's going on there. And that makes the fact that they sleep with each other truly bizarre. I don't know if the writers of DS9 are just like, everyone has to fuck. Everyone's got to fuck to wrap this series up.
We've got 10 episodes left and there are characters who haven't fucked.
It's just the writer's board. It's just a whiteboard of lines and names connecting people who've had sex with each other and just pounding it out. I think
it says Kai Winn draws a line into the next box that says "fucked?" ? And then "no" written underneath it.
I like this idea of, as much as I think that the main problem with Dukat is that after Waltz, they really had to work very hard and very artificially to bring him back into the story. I think that's the greatest weakness of Dukat. So they kind of sledgehammer him into this power wraith role that, because they haven't developed it well enough, you still kind of don't really believe that this is what he believes, but he does. Like he's enamored with them at this point. And what I think is really great about combining him with Winn is that it takes 2 of the series villains and it combines them in a way that I think totally makes sense with how their power dynamic would play out, where Dukat gets the upper hand on her and tells the story. And I think it's particularly twisted that after the butcher and the overseer of the Bajoran occupation is kicked out, he comes back and he uses the religion of the people he oppressed against them, which I think is really kind of twisted and dark and perfect for that character. Their conversations just aren't that lively is really the problem for me.
Yeah, I like the idea. I also like that he uses his own knowledge of things that he did during the occupation to pull one over on her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still on the fence about this Gul Dukat turned into a Bajoran thing. I don't know. Like you said, it just feels like they were desperately trying to figure out how to jam him back into the story. What I do really like, though, is I like what they're doing with Damar. He's probably the most interesting character going for me right now, because I'm really curious to see what he's going to do when push comes to shove with him, because clearly he's got that remorseful war criminal kind of thing going on.
Yes.
So
well, he's I guess I would define Damar as. Damar is kind of realizing that he has no importance in what's going on. Like he is, they showed in this scene Wei Yun doesn't tell him where they're going. So
right.
As much as he's realizing that as they signed up to save Cardassia allied with the Dominion to stop the Klingons from destroying them. He's now realizing that they kind of sold their soul to the devil and that they aren't really getting anything out of this. They're just some subjugated race. And so he's picking up his drinking. But I think the most interesting scene with Damar is when he's packing Dukat's bag for his trip. And Dukat gives him a really interesting, great speech that kind of lifts his spirits, where he says, like, you have to be the man that I knew you were a few years ago. We can never go back to that time where we were sailing around fighting the Klingons on our own. And I can't come back because of the power wraiths, but you can't throw it all away. Like, you have to do something with your life. And it's an interesting speech because coming from Dukat, it's a very sensible, but also kind of unexpected for Dukat to tell anybody that kind of thing.
Yeah. Sorry, you stopped abruptly. I wasn't ready for it.
I think it's a neat scene to have Dukat, this sort of like pure evil being at this point, who's plotting the destruction of everybody. He does have a soft spot for Damar, and it shines through, and he kind of lifts Damar out of the doldrums a little bit.
Yeah. I think Damar is gonna be a dark horse character for me going forward, and for exactly that reason, they've managed to, over the past few episodes, turn him into a pretty interesting character when he was just sort of like Cardassian number 2 for a while. After Dukat disappeared and they kind of pushed him forward, he was just sort of, doing the evil laugh thing with Weyoun for a while, but now they've kind of actually put some thought into where he's going to go, and I think it's interesting. Yeah, especially the part where Weyoun just would not tell him what was going on, so then he had to fly off to a casino planet to find a code breaker in order to come back and then figure out how to end the story in a satisfying way.
Damar actually, Damar's come a long way. He started off, I'm sure you remember, as just kind of a generic sub-commander for Dukat in one episode. Yeah. He didn't have a name, I don't think, or anything. He was just the guy that he would talk to. And they've kept him going, and he is pretty nifty at this point, because he's the character that you can feel something is brewing with him, but it's not exactly obvious what he wants to do with things. In a way that you can kind of, like, we know what Dukat is up to. We know what Sisko is deciding to do. We know what Worf and Ezri are up to, and like how they want to proceed. But Damar is the powder keg that's kind of sitting there waiting for stuff to happen.
Yeah, I can see Damar taking the place, quote unquote, of Dukat, in that he ultimately ends up making decisions for A, himself, but B, for what he considers to be the good of Cardassia over the ultimate wishes of the Dominion and the founders and stuff. Yeah, which, I think that'll be interesting if and when that happens.
Yeah. I think that the only other real aspect to this, they push the founder's sickness is still getting worse and everything like that. I don't think there's too much else. I feel like I want to say more about the Dukat and Winn scenes. I don't really know what else there is to say about those two, but I think that I've never been really impressed with Winn, I don't think. And maybe it makes sense that she ends up in this place where she's kind of getting played in this way. However, I think the lack of what they did with her makes her a little bit... You don't have much sympathy for her, I suppose. And I think that maybe a better written series, or one that was building towards knowing what Winn was going to do, or had like more of an understanding of what the Winn character was, there would sort of be like a sad tragedy to her in what she's ended up here, where she's kind of desperate for this to go through, and being a true believer, she wants like desperately to save Bajor, to help Bajor, but I don't know, it doesn't really come across that way for me, so it lands a little bit flat with him or her.
Yeah, I feel like she comes off a little bit dumb in this episode, and she's not really a dumb character. And only because I understand that she is acting because, teacher never called on her, so the one time that she gets called on, she wants to make sure she gets it right. But I don't know. I just feel like she's going along with it way too easily.
Yeah. Do you think that's just the fault of the script not making the Vision and Dukat's coincidences powerful enough?
Sure.
Or do you think it's just not enough time for her to sort of come across this way?
I think I think the problem for me is that at no point in this episode does she question whether or not like this is the guy or this is the way I should be going. Because she's been established as someone who is very much in a believer of the religion, but she's also not an idiot. She's also uses the religion and all of its trappings to consolidate her own power.
Mm-hmm.
And just blindly handing herself over to this vision, and then this guy magically shows up and says all the right things. Like, she doesn't push back or like question it at all. She's just like wide-eyed and ready to go on a trip. And I wonder if realistically maybe she would. I would have liked to see maybe Dukat gets a couple details wrong or something.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, that's not how I remember. And he's like, oh, well, I mean, of course. No, of course not. I misspoke. That kind of stuff. Whereas there's a little bit of apprehension for her to, instead of her just like, going blindly into this, I lost my words, but you know what I mean? It's also, why does she have to sleep with him?
The sleeping with him is strange. I think that the script is kind of hinting that there's supposed to be some kind of sexual chemistry between the two of them. There isn't, unfortunately, in the final performance.
Very subtle hint.
But I think the way that they kind of play it, but I don't know if it lands as importantly or like seemingly to be the point as Dukat's coincidences, is that I think the way to make Winn more believable in what she does here is to really highlight the fact that she never wanted Sisko to be in that role. And they bring it up here where Dukat says, like, how can he be the emissary? He's not even a Bajoran. And
yeah,
I think if Dukat's plot had kind of leaned more into him realizing that she wanted desperately to replace the emissary and him playing that up, I can see her more personally being drawn into it than just kind of like, oh, what a coincidence. Like, you must be from Heaven Sent because you know these things. Like, if he was able to push her and pull her and like pull those strings a little bit, I'd be a little bit more believable that he'd be able to ingratiate himself that way with her.
Yeah, like if there was a scene, if during one of those scenes he was like, oh, it's such a great day that the emissary is getting married, and Kai Winn just starts like barking back towards him about how Sisko's screwing everything up.
Right.
Like he was never, I don't know why they came to him. He's just, he's going expressly against the will of the prophets and, that kind of thing, where she's like, she's thinking about it politically, but she's also thinking about it from a spiritual standpoint. And, then that's like an open wound for Dukat to get his fit to put salt in. That's like his bread and butter right there, is that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of making up stories about crops failing and stuff.
Yeah, or changing logs to get sent to a different planet, labor camp, and saving lives. Yeah. He's like, I did that.
I think the crops thing is where it started to lose me, where it's like the linchpin is where he's like, oh, I've just received word from the homeworld that my crops are coming in. Surely this meeting was preordained by the prophets, wouldn't you say?
The seeds that I've planted have started to sprout. It's a miracle. She's like, it is a miracle. My God, like, who would have expected your crops to grow? That's great. I guess we're supposed to be impressed with the rapid pace of the growth or something, but it doesn't seem that impressive.
I had the seeds sitting in a cup on my desk and nothing happened, but after I accidentally knocked them into the soil, they started to grow. It's a miracle.
Hydroponics setup, and it is the stickiest of the icky, Kai Winn. I don't know if you're interested in partaking.
I've brought some from the homeworld if you'd like to sample it.
I think we're done talking about Till Death Do Us. Well, let's talk actually the marriage ceremony. Sisko's married. Did it do anything for you?
Yeah, I liked it.
I liked it.
That's I think you kind of said this earlier. Sisko getting married is a big signal of the end of the series for me.
Yep.
Because the thing with his wife was such a central point of his character at the beginning, and so much of his character growth has been moving on after the death of his wife and reconciling blah, 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 blah.
Raising Jake by himself.
Raising Jake, ignoring the criminal past of his new wife.
Learning when to look the other way is a good way to put that, yeah.
Him getting married very much feels like that, for the most part. I don't want to say that chapter is over, but that it is definitely moving on. Like, there is... especially with the prophecy and all that kind of stuff, or the vision, there's obviously more to come. It's not like Sisko getting married is the last episode of the show. There's still more to do.
Yep.
But it definitely signals a change and sort of a winding down of what's going on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. I had one more thing I wanted to say about the Ezri and Worf stuff.
Oh, sure. I'll just My thing about the marriage ceremony is that I 100% agree. It feels like the end of the Sisko storyline, or at least it's like the last line heading into the final little clause or whatever, however you want to make that analogy. But I think that I like the smallness of the ceremony. I like the fact that the Bajorans were threatening him with a statewide, planet-wide celebration. And in defying the prophets, he also defies the Bajorans at that point. Yes. And he kind of claims what he wants for himself. And I think the small wedding ceremony, with not even all the senior officers there, because Worf and Ezri are getting tased on the Breen ship, I think that really is like a nice visual symbolism of his decision. And I think it wraps it up really nicely. I think that it's well done. I think that it's cute without being overly heavy-handed. They get it in and out, and it's like very brief. Admiral Ross comes back to do his vows and everything. I like it. It's a good ending for those two. But what do you want to say about Worf and Ezri, and then we'll wrap to final thoughts?
Well, I was thinking, if you're going to do that story or spend so much time with these characters and who are ostensibly a couple, for lack of a better term, I feel like, especially when you're coming into the end of your series, I feel like that time would be much more well spent and much more interestingly spent if it was Kira and Odo, because they have become such a non-factor in anything and seem to be just like very happy with each other. Putting them in a situation that tests their relationship, and also tests their relationship on a personal level, but also in the larger context of the war that they're fighting, I think would have been a much better use of that kind of thing. Because the Ezri and Worf thing, like we said, it feels like that story's over. But we've never really gotten anything out of Kira and Odo other than, aren't they cute, but also kind of weird.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'd agree. It's a continuing thread that we have about those two are weirdly backgrounded for a lot of this, and it feels like they should be more prime and more important to it. But I also kind of, I feel Worf has been backgrounded to some extent. He's very prominent in these two episodes, but I feel like he hasn't really done anything in a while.
Well, I was also thinking, what about Worf and Kira? So you're not doing like a romantic with each other thing, but they both have romantic stuff going on
elsewhere.
That would be a fairly interesting contrast if they got into some of that stuff. And I don't know. I don't think Worf and Ezri is the right call. I think there are more interesting character combinations that you could really get into some stuff that hasn't been talked about. Instead of it, because I think the biggest proof that it's not maybe the right call is that every scene in this episode is just so boring.
Yeah.
And they're not doing anything. They're just, you're literally watching them get driven to someone's house,
Yeah, maybe that's a little harsh. I'll say that it certainly feels like they're treading water. Like what they're saying kind of matters, and it's not that the scene is a total waste of time, but it's Worf and Ezri is the most egregious because I feel like their scene repeats 3 times over itself. It's like there's never this like concise scene where everything is summed up. It's like Ezri's hallucinating, then Worf's hallucinating, then they get pulled off again, then they're back together, then they're arguing, then there's a scene cut, then they come back and they're arguing again. And it's just too much of that story. There's no reason for that to be taking up so much time.
And there's and to what end, you know?
Yeah.
Like what do you get before they get revealed to be having been brought to Weyoun, what are you getting out of that story other than Worf is now jealous of Bashir?
That's a good point, because I think that's why you could say that working in Odo or Kira into that would work better, because the problem with that storyline is that the personal conflict is entirely detached from what their like overarching narrative in the storyline is. Like they're kind of just two random characters who have a problem and are stuck in a storyline that is necessary to show you what the Dominion are up to, but it doesn't relate to what the Dominion are up to.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel as cleanly written as you would expect for that kind of thing. You'd expect a little bit more like thematic crossover or something, I guess.
Yeah. It just, I don't know what's going to happen with them moving forward, but it just feels like it's there for the sake of having them get to where they're going. And, and even so, like even if they are important to whatever the story is that comes after this, I feel like if you did one scene at the end of this episode where you just like cut back, like you could have done the entire episode revolving around Sisko and Cassidy and Kai Winn and Dukat, and then at the end have your last scene be 2 or 3 minutes with Ezri and Worf as they get brought to Weyoun.
Right. Yeah.
You don't need to keep going back to them because they're not. No, nothing's going on to go back to.
Nope. I'd agree. Let's take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. We'll come back, read some patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about Till Death Do Us Part.
If you do this, you will know only sorrow.
You shared my mother's existence. You must have some idea what love is. You should know that I will never be happy without Cassidy.
Your path is a difficult one. I cannot change what is to come.
I know.
Be careful, my son.
All right, everybody. So if you enjoyed the content today, you can support the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. It's the best way to do it. $2 a month gets you extra stuff. And it's really much appreciated. And as always, the Captain Tier supporters get a shout out. Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Captain Quark, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Mosk, David Beardmore, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Icy Unicorns, Yarpy, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Cal Barrett, Matt Courier, Matt Cutler, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Exergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elwood, Samuel Custer, Grim Santos, Sean Spinobi, Tark Latif, Tom Hiles, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much for supporting the show. It means a lot to us. And yeah, we're almost done. We're almost done with DS9 and then on to bigger things, I suppose. But we're going to talk about patron comments now. If you're a patron, you leave your thoughts on upcoming episodes and we read them. Point Extra G says, I never much cared for the Worf and Ezri storyline. It just seems a bit too melodramatic for me. Sisko defying the prophets makes sense to me, but I'm with Kira. This can't be good. And apparently random dudes can just show up and manipulate the Kai. Zamnuka Russell says, 2 touches here aren't strictly necessary, but they make the world feel consistent. 1, Dukat's parting speech highlights that he's always been pushing other characters towards their full potential, from Odo and Necessary Evil onwards. And number 2, Ezri's delirium makes nice use of her recent experiences. They might not have been great episodes, but they help Worf see that this is a woman he does not really know. Interesting point. Captain Quark says, this is a decent episode that serves as more of a setup for things to come. The Sisko storyline was compelling. Again, the prophets aren't making themselves 100% clear, but I suppose you can argue that if they did, then their plan wouldn't happen. Mark Lamo again shines as Dukat. He's somehow creepier as a Bajoran. The Worf and Ezri scenes are the low point of this episode, as it doesn't seem like anything they go through ultimately matters. I'm not an expert, but isn't Ezri's view on the psychological meaning of dreams outdated even in this century? Then again, maybe she's not a good counselor. Maybe she's just not a good counselor. Not Troy bad, but still pretty mediocre. Christian Pouch. Trust me, Sisko. A small wedding is the way to go. As awful as his indecision was for Cassidy, I'm glad it shows in the end that he's not blindly following the will of the prophets. In other news, Dukat is twisted as fuck. The Winn is easily manipulated by the power wraiths, and Ezri and Worf aren't a whole lot of fun to watch. Damar is a treat, though. Who would have guessed from his first appearances that we'd get this kind of performance in the end? Finally, I like the brutish efficiency of the Breen. No words that we can understand anyway. No taunting. Just go in, get what you want, and get out. Tough bastards, too, because one that Worf attacks Worf attacks shrugs off of the hit like it is nothing.
What do they even want?
The Breen?
Yeah. Like, why is that? Do we learn that? Or like, why do they keep...
I think they're trying to probe them for Federation secrets, is my understanding. Because Worf says he's going into some kind of like cerebral mind-reading device, and that's why they're having these dream sequences where they're yelling out their memories.
Oh, like the squid.
Yes.
From Rogue One. I was expecting when they brought back Worf, I was expecting him to go, they didn't even ask me any questions.
Yeah, I think they're trying to pry out some secrets from them, and this is the way that they do it.
His Netflix password?
Damar, I would say, like, it is always kind of funny when you get a performance like Damar, who's a character who's not supposed to be anything, but actually turns out to be he's a pretty good actor in this. Like, he's not a weak link, and obviously the writers are going to reward actors who are capable of doing things with stuff, but it's always nice when you get one that like the actor just kind of works out for a situation instead of the other way around. He's been good. He's interesting.
What was the deal, unless I misheard it, when Ezri is having her dream talking, she says something about, it's okay, Garak, I'm your sister? Did I mishear that?
Yes. Why?
Because that doesn't make any sense. Like, that confused me while I was like, so are these... I feel like she's having dreams about her past lives or something. But it sounded to me like she said something about being Garak's sister.
Why would it be Garak's? I do remember that. I don't remember why she says it. One of the listeners will correct us as to why that. Was there an episode where she posed as Garak's sister or something?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I can't remember. Someone let us know why she says that, because the other things she says stick out to me as memories from episodes that happened.
Yeah. Because she says, I'm
Joran,
not like
I'm not
you.
a murderer.
Joran.
Yeah. Let's see here. Till Death Do Us Part by Yarpy. Louise Fletcher is a good actress, but she gets very little to work with as Kai Winn. And the whole Prophets versus Power Wraith seems so superimposed or glued into the whole story arc, even though Marco Lamo is still great to watch as Dukat. Sisko's wedding stuff is a bit so-so, same with Dax and Worf, although Damar gets more to work with the character than she did early in the season, and she does have enough chemistry with Michael Dorn to make their scenes work well enough. Damar keeps growing as a character, and I really like Biggs and Combs together. I think those two actors are very suitable to play off of each other. Norman Buckwald says, the second episode of the arc is stronger and further provides artfully the structure feel of what is to come. The work on the characterization in this 10 arc was especially strong in how it depicts Kai Winn, who comes across more cardboard last season in The Reckoning. Came across more cardboard last seasoning in The Reckoning. Here the reason for who she is and how she responds to the Prophets is strong, and whoever came up with the bonding her together with Dukat was genius. Fletcher and Olamo work so great together. Ezri's confession was ridiculously cliche, mentioning her love from a dream and right after the narrative clip show dream of all the other episodes from the season to boot. But thematically it's perfect, especially in how it contrasts Sisko and Cassidy to Yikes, Winn, and Dukat. And for that matter, the title especially works perfectly for Worf, who now has to confront his mixed feelings with Dax and that Ezri is not Jadzia. A 4 out of 5.
You know what I think I would have done if changing the characters wasn't an option?
Yep.
I think I would have taken what they were hinting at, or maybe we were talking about from the last episode, where you have Dax sort of not being able to handle all of the emotions and all of the memories and stuff that she's been dealing with. And then in this episode, so that's why she goes out, to find Worf, and then, she's talking to him about not really being able to reconcile stuff because she's got all these people in her head or whatever, and then, they kind of hook up and it calms them down or whatever. And then on the ship, the torture or the zapping or something causes her Trill to like freak out or something.
Like she goes like between the personalities or something like that.
Yeah, like not like literally. It's not like she's flipping back and forth doing voices and stuff, but it's like it's really messing her up, and it's really causing this trauma to her, which Worf is then there to experience in what he's hearing from her, but also try to be the one who's sort of like helping her through it.
Yeah.
And then at least you've got some like character arc stuff and action happening. instead of them just sitting there yapping about escape plans, So to build off what you did in the last episode, in a way that's a little bit less forced than just Worf getting jealous because she has a crush on Bashir.
Yeah, I like that idea because the crush on Bashir, as you're saying, is what kind of triggers the difference between them. But I think that if Worf was exposed to a malfunctioning Trill, I think it shows you as a person that it's not the person you knew. It is just this conglomeration of memories that are in this person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're kind of yanked out of the thing of like, oh, this is not just Jadzia, like this is just a collection of sort of random memories, and Jadzia is just one of those memories, and it's not really her. I think that's a more effective way for Worf to separate himself from Dax when he makes that realization. Cal Barrett says, final comment, overall, I think this is a strong episode, but each storyline has an aspect that bugs me. I enjoy Sisko's struggle where he once again has to choose between his personal desires and his duty to the prophets, but I feel it was missing a scene because how it is in the episode makes it seem like he married Cassidy just because the ring was non-refundable. I like Worf and Ezri's back and forth and where the relationship stands at the end of the episode, but the truth being revealed by sleep talking is too easy and silly. And when we get those great scenes of Dukat manipulating Winn, and then we get the great scenes of Dukat manipulating Winn, the performances are captivating, and I like seeing both villains interact while they're thinking they're pursuing the interests of their alternative higher powers. But them getting hot and sweaty together at the end? No thanks. A good episode, but it's still ramping up. Thank you very much, patrons, for leaving your thoughts about Till Death Do Us Part. Clay, what are you going to give this one on our scale of 1 to 5?
I don't know. Part of me, I can't. I guess a 3. Yeah, I'm going to go with a 3.
I'm also going to give it a 3. I think
I was borderline 2.
Oh, interesting. You thought this one is worse than the first one?
No, I don't know. I just it just felt like a lot of treading water for me. And I know that it's not, but it just I'm surprised at how slow it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the stuff that they do, Ezri and Worf aside, is interesting enough, and it's all done pretty fairly well. So I'll go with a 3.
Yeah, I'll give it a 3 as well. I think it's almost indistinguishable from the first episode, Penumbra. I feel very similar to it, where they're almost kind of the same episode, and so I think giving both of them a 3 is kind of appropriate for me. But not. It is slower than you'd expect. They're certainly not jumping out with the fireworks right away to start off the entire thing. It's more of a slow build there, and I guess at this point my main question is the storylines they're choosing to focus on, to the extent of not even jumping to fresh storylines in the second episode of this arc. They're just going to keep going with the Sisko and Dukat and Worf and Ezri stuff, which is a choice. I just don't know if it's the right choice.
Yeah, we'll see. Remains to be seen.
Let's see. That's it. Thank you very much, guys, for listening and supporting the show. You can follow all the social media links down below: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, if you want to join the conversation. Patreon.com/The Pensky File if you want to support the show. It's the best way to do it. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we're done?
Yeah, I had one more thing I wanted to ask. This is a little bit of a non sequitur, but not really. How do you feel about clapping with the back of your hand?
Like the back of one hand into the other hand?
Yeah, because I've noticed that Kira does it, and it's very strange to me. I've seen people do it in real life, but I don't know why it just stands out as a strange thing.
I'm sort of miming it now to myself as to why I would do it. I guess it kind of feels like a polite, like jazz clap or something. Almost, it feels like it's like a more respectful, softer sound than clapping your hands together. I don't know why anyone would do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It just stood out. Because it's not something that I feel like you see that often.
Do you think when she really starts clapping hard, she flips it over? Or does she just keep whacking the back of her hand?
Part of me thought it was supposed to be passive aggressive, maybe, but
I wonder if the Bajorans don't do it in general, do they? I don't know.
That's quite a detail.
I have no idea whether or not the Bajorans were worked out to be certain kind of clappers or not, but I don't know. No, I don't. I don't clap that way. I clap two hands together like that, just like that. I think we're done. That's it for Till Death Do Us Part. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I think Strange Bedfellows is the next episode. It is. So we'll be back with that one. Oh, it's also Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope you enjoy Turkey Day. And the podcast will maybe have provided a little bit of entertainment as you were driving to the family or wherever you're going, or if you're just staying at home. Just people do that too. I think that's it. Any Turkey Day plans for you, Clay?
Just going to my girlfriend's family's get together on the South Shore.
Yep.
We might try to go to. We have a tendency to be very indecisive when it comes to where to go for holidays. So it just means we end up driving for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Trying to hit both.
Amy's working,
Yourselves?
so we're not doing anything.
Yeah, that's great. We were thinking about trying to come up with a reason to get out of going altogether. We've managed to do that consistently the past couple of years on Easter, but we haven't dared try it on like a big 2 holiday.
Yeah. The end of the year holidays are the biggest ones. They all hit right in a row. No, yeah, Amy's working, so we're just hanging out here, and then she'll work that night, and then that's it for Thanksgiving. But otherwise, I think that's it. Happy Turkey Day to everybody out there, and we'll be back on Monday with the next episode. See ya.